I'm Heather Zykowski, the babe with the power, and coming up next on The Sound of Tomorrow on WAYO LP Rochester, we're going to be telling stories. We've got some story time. We're going to be talking about irony, and we've got an update on Digidog. But first,
Ooh, I'm a spooky ghost.
oh my gosh, Ross, I'm so sorry to hear it. What a way to find this out. I'm absolutely beside myself. This is terrible. Oh my goodness. I have to call Mike.
Oh, I could just give him a message.
Like, from the other side? Whoa. I guess that would be fine. Sure, let's do that then.
Okay, just leave your message when you hear the spooky wail.
Okay, so there's no easy way to say this, but I heard about Ross, and I just wanted you to know that I'm here for whatever you need. As soon as I hang up, I'm going to start on a lasagna, which I believe is traditional in these circumstances.
Wait. Hold up. In what circumstances?
Oh, am I still leaving a message for Mike? No? I mean, the circumstances of your death. Naturally, I don't know the exact circumstances, but I assume you were either crushed under a pile of your own Supergirl comics, or, more likely, ate too many donuts, went into a sugar-induced rage, and picked a fight with a Wolverine.
Those are very specific.
Your story arc has always been pretty predictable, except for this ghost bit. Shock twist, well done.
I mean, yeah, that took me by surprise as well. But you don't need to worry too much about Mike. I'm still here, you know?
Well, yeah, of course, you live on in the hearts of all of us who remember you, and in the perfect beauty of the first winter snowflake.
Oh, really? Gross. God, I hate snow.
I don't make the rules.
But no, I mean, I'm literally still here.
As a spooky ghost?
Well, yes, but I'm also still literally here, like in the flesh.
How did you pull that off?
Okay, so typical Ross, right? So I cut myself while I was painting one of the rooms, you know, but I'm definitely way too cheap to buy new paint just because it has a little of my vital essence in it. And you know what a gusher I am, right?
I'll say, one time you got a paper cut on the elevator at work and it turned into that scene from The Shining.
Right. So the walls are now positively lousy with my blood. And you know that there's no way that a house with blood in the walls isn't totally haunted. And since the blood is mine, I'm also, by definition and ghost law, the specter who now haunts this land. But you know, I'm not dead or anything. Or am I? I'm not.
This sounds complicated.
Totally. Oh my god. Vampires and neighborhood dogs have been sneaking in just to lick my walls. And if you've ever tried to sleep through the sounds of your own eerie wailing, well, I don't recommend it.
Oh, please. If I can sleep over my teeth grinding and screams of existential angst, I could definitely handle some ghostly howls.
Okay, yeah, you do get it. That makes sense. I get that you get it. You know, on the whole, it's fine though. I mean, it might be better if you could still bring the lasagna.
That depends. Can I lick the walls?
What?
What?
You want to?
Oh, I see the confusion. No, it's not the blood. I just really like the taste of fresh paint.
Oh, gotcha. Oh, I thought it was something weird.
I really do like the taste of fresh paint.
I know you do. I like the taste of blood. Hi, everybody. I'm Ross Johnson, your favorite co-host.
And I'm Heather Zykowski, the babe with the power.
Welcome
You're listening
back.
to The Sound of Tomorrow on WAYO LP Rochester.
I think I jumped on your station read last week, and you were ready this time for me. You were prepared.
I was so ready. I was
you.
just barging right through it. Well, last week also we had that little issue where I forgot how to talk right at the beginning of the show, which I remember because I was doing a lot of cleaning this weekend and I was just listening to podcasts. And for some reason, I still subscribe to The Sound of Tomorrow. So I did listen to our most recent show, and I have to say, it's pretty good.
They're all pretty good. I gotta
They're
say,
all pretty good. It's kind of weird, isn't it?
If you're listening to this, you know that.
Yeah.
Or you just popped on and you're trying something new and that's
Yeah, you
fine.
might be. You might be driving in your car.
Probably won't last
You
long.
might have accidentally subscribed to us and now you're cleaning and your hands are all like full of soap. So you can't really
Right.
get your iPod and you can't like switch the show. So now
You've
you're
got
just stuck.
paint. You got paint all over your
You might
hands,
have some
you know?
paint.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're making
So
cookies
tell
and
me
your
about this.
hands are covered in batter and yeah.
Right. There's so many things where you're out mowing the lawn. You
Right.
got your big gardening gloves on. You can't
There
be
are
doing
tons
that
of
kind of
reasons
stuff.
people listen to U of R. SOT.
Wow.
That was weird.
Wow.
Just had a little mental break there for a second. SOT. Sometimes I forget that acronyms are different for different things.
Yes. You just welcome to scuba.
Yeah.
What?
I don't know. So what were we talking about? What's
All
the show
good
about?
times. I was asking you about paint. So you've been painting.
Oh yeah, so that's a true story about the blood and the paint. But it's not a lot, so I don't need like the Board of Health coming over or anything. I don't know. But I really it really threw me for a loop because I was like, "Oh, now my house has blood in the walls and it's haunted, but it's my blood?"
Yeah.
So it's confusing. I really don't know like
That's true.
what that movie's about, you know? Unless the blood
Right.
draws other ghosts, but that doesn't make any sense. Why would unrelated ghosts be into my blood? That
Yeah. No, I don't think
doesn't make any
so.
sense.
Yeah. I do wonder. I wonder about the ramifications.
So
But
haunted by me,
also,
or maybe
don't you
after I
think
die, it's
that,
haunted by me. Like maybe this is maybe I've like you can pre-buy a burial
yeah,
plot.
right.
Maybe
You
I've
might have primed
pre-haunted my
it.
house. Yeah,
You might have. Though, don't you think that everybody's house probably has like a little bit of blood in the walls or the floors or something?
that's true. Because a lot goes into building a house. There's probably a lot of probably a little. Everybody probably bleeds a little bit somewhere.
I would think so. And I mean, by that logic, like for some reason, the past couple times I've been out doing yard work, I've managed to catch my hands on something,
Yeah,
and then I just end up bleeding all over my yard.
right.
But not a lot. Like it's nothing where I should have given myself like huge amounts of mental, mental and medical attention. But it is definitely something where there is enough blood that now, in theory, I haunt my yard.
Do you find that the yard no longer grows well if without the blood? I'm just
It
curious.
really, I've got to say, since I bled on the lawn, it's been coming in really great, but also I reseeded with clover.
Okay.
And I've got to tell you, my clover yard, it's coming along. Not quite as well as when I did it originally because we haven't had the heat, but it's taking sprout out there. So maybe, give me a couple weeks, you can come on over and play in my clover.
You can come and lick my walls. Um, I don't know if we can have this conversation during drive time, but I feel like I feel like I don't know. It's too mature.
Yeah.
But
So I don't know. Do you think that I haunt my yard now, and you're going to haunt your house?
I think you definitely haunt your house.
Oh,
I
yes, I
think
haunt many things. I just
they
recently had this discussion, in fact.
I don't think you haunt many things. I think you haunt literally your house. And that's pretty much it. And that's what the neighbor kids talk about when
I
they
think I also haunt other houses.
sort of cross the street and, avoid the and dare each other to go up to the front door. I don't know. But so do I think you haunt your house and your lawn? Yes, absolutely. I do think that.
Well, that's all right.
Paul went into old Lady
Old
Zykowski's
Lady
yard.
Zykowski's yard. I would not mind having the reputation of Old Lady Zykowski.
Yeah.
And I might, I'm not sure. I don't know. I mean, I was being creepy today because RG&E had people doing tree work. And okay, maybe I wasn't being creepy. They were just all over my property and they were ringing my doorbell and stuff. So I'm like,
Oh,
what do you need? And so then I go out and nobody's there and I'm like, what? And then they're wandering all like they come down my driveway, like up by the porch. So they're just sauntering around. I'm like, hi, I was like, oh, I rang your doorbell because we needed to be on your property, but we already did what we needed to do. And I'm like, well, I came right down when you rang the doorbell, which I don't usually do, but I saw them out there. So I was like, someone needs to talk to me for something. So it all struck me as a little bit odd.
So it sounds like they were haunting your property and you were
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, hopefully the reason they were in my yard for such a short while is some kind of ghost of me rose up to protect my home.
Your clover.
Yes.
They just wanted to romp in your clover, Heather. Is that too much to ask?
I didn't. From them, yes.
Yeah.
You're allowed. Certain people are allowed. You need permission for that.
Of course. That's what all the signs say.
That's right.
By appointment only, it says.
That's right.
Right
you
on
need
your
my
clover.
Permission granted.
I guess so. I have good news.
I want to hear it.
Your boy is fully vaccinated today.
Oh, Ross. And by the time everybody out there hears this on Wednesday, the entire Sound of Tomorrow twosome of Ross and Heather will be fully vaccinated. So that means we are going to continue staying in our homes, and you will not actually have to worry about us being out somewhere. Definitely not together.
No, absolutely not.
I don't think so.
So
no,
nothing's going to change. But I get to be smug about it, so that's fun for me.
Yeah.
I'm
excited for you.
Yeah, I'm still going to. I might, if I get really brave, I might come by your house and hold up my hand to the window, and then you can.
Yes.
Yeah.
But that's what we've been doing. You go up on the porch like the RG&E tree guys.
Right.
But see, again, you're invited.
So this is I've got a dumb slash. Like, it's fun. I don't know. You can tell me. You know what? I will let you make the call on this. If this is hilarious or infuriating. Okay. I can't decide. So there's a school in Miami, in the Miami area in Florida, called Centner Academy. Now at Centner Academy, it's a they describe it as a fee-paying school, which I assume just means a private school. I don't know I don't know if there's a difference between a private school and a fee-paying school, but they describe it as a fee-paying school. So it's a private school. I'm going to say it's a private school. Who cares? Co-founder of the school, Lila Centner, informed parents this past week that the Academy's policy is to not employ anyone who has received a COVID-19 vaccine at this time. I found this in the BBC, but I guess CBS News in Miami reported this. In a letter last week to the staff, Mrs. Centner said teachers must notify the school if they had already received the jab. We cannot allow recently vaccinated people to be near our students. So the article mentions that the reason given was a false claim of vaccinated individuals affecting unvaccinated people, saying this is what the school is saying. 3 women in the school's community had their menstrual cycles impacted after having been in contact with a vaccinated person. So the article nicely points out that there is no evidence whatsoever. It doesn't even say that there's no evidence. It basically says this is not. It doesn't. It goes even a step further than no evidence to say, like, this is basically nonsense. So, what do you think? Hilarious or infuriating?
To make sure I understand this correctly, a school is not letting any vaccinated person be an employee.
Correct.
And they're not letting people who've been vaccinated, presumably just vaccinated against COVID-19, yes? Like maybe if you were a child and you got your measles, mumps, rubella, like a lot of people in the US got.
This says COVID-19 vaccine specifically. So this is COVID-19 vaccine. Awesome. I don't know what their policy is on other vaccines.
Okay. Awesome. And they don't want the vaccinated people in the building because if you are a vaccinated person and you come near a person who menstruates, you're
Yes.
going to disrupt their menstrual cycle.
In some non-specific way. Yes.
Right. Because I am wondering, like, if they've got their period, does it stop or do they, like, does their period immediately start after seeing the vaccinated person? Like,
Yeah, and if there's more
is it
detail on that,
late?
if there's more detail on that in what the school put out, it's not in the article. So I
That
the
that makes no sense
it
whatsoever.
makes no sense. And it seems so arbitrary. Like it's so, I mean, it's an angle that I just didn't even think anybody had thought of. Like, well, I mean, and to disrupt, I mean, not only, I mean, even moving past just the silliness of the basic premise, then you're moving into like you're messing with people's employment. You're like you're it says that teachers might be able to come back next year if and when there's more information. Basically, like this applies to this school year. Next school year, they're saying if positions are available, and essentially like if this principal of the school is satisfied at that point that the COVID-19 vaccine is safe based on her scientific knowledge of the three people she talked to that had their menstrual cycles disrupted in some non-specific way, then maybe, and the jobs are open, maybe they'd be invited back. But I mean, so you're basically like, for all intents and purposes, you're firing presumably fully qualified teachers because hopefully these are teachers that you hired because you wanted them to work there initially.
I, I, yeah, I'm just shaking my head in bafflement. And I have to say, this, I guess if this weren't another thing that was literally endangering people's lives,
Right.
I would say it was silly, but instead I find it infuriating because sometimes people have these beliefs that are very silly, but like nobody is going to get hurt or sick or die.
Right.
But when it
I
comes
have
to misinformation about the COVID vaccine, like that's kind of a matter of life and death for real.
Yeah, I mean, I have beliefs that are silly. I try not to get into life and death things with those. Like when
Yeah,
it comes into life or death or things that affect other people, I try to dig a little deeper than just like
yeah,
I talked to a lady who said something weird happened to her menstrual cycle.
right. That is so strange. And it also, I mean, you know how like myths about periods also bother me because there's so much misinformation and so much weird mystique about a perfectly normal thing that happens to
Yeah.
perfectly normal human bodies. And so these things put together, like, okay, there's something where there's misinformation being spread about something that is literally saving human lives, protecting communities around the globe, and helping to hopefully stem the spread of a truly deadly disease. And then, like, let's put more weird stigma on menstruation.
Well, and it's you made me think of something as you were saying that because it it does sound a little bit like witchcraft, doesn't it? I mean,
It really
there is
does.
sort of
Like, you
a
look at the witch and she's going to make something weird happen with your period.
yeah, that really like you say that, and
Yeah.
now that's all I can think of is because it is sort of magical, like you didn't do blind studies on this. You didn't do, there's no, you're not pulling data from global data from the CDC. You're um assuming that you're even telling the truth about the stories you heard, because I presume you're not giving out names of people whose menstrual cycles were disrupted. You're just sort of like, I know some ladies who looked at a vaccinated person and then they, their babies fell out. It was like, I mean, like,
Yeah.
and it
Yeah.
is a little bit, and instead of burn the witch, we're just going to fire her, which is, I think, probably the 21st century equivalent, right?
Well, I mean, after a fashion, yeah. And I don't like the vagueness of their menstrual cycles were disrupted because
Right.
there's an awful lot of variation in menstrual cycles. And there are things that can make your cycle different than it usually is.
Well, and again,
But I
this
don't
goes
like
without.
this non-specific disruption.
Well, and again, this even if that part of the story bears out, right? Like even if there was some disruption to some people, whatever it is, I think it goes without saying we have intelligent listeners who know a thing or two about science, um, usually more than us. But I think it goes without saying too that if you're vaccinating hundreds of millions of people, and then you go, oh, here's this sample of hundreds of millions of people who got the vaccine. Well, and then my grandpa had a heart attack. It's like, well,
Yes.
they're or my aunt got in a car accident, or Timmy lost a tooth. I mean, there are things that are when you're dealing with that big a portion of the population, there are life things that are going to happen. I got the vaccine and the batteries in my remote control died. I mean, there are things that are going to happen in life that, that's why you can't do science based on anecdotes because
right. Yeah, because there's absolutely no causation. It's a coincidence.
Yeah.
And I would think if anything with this connection, looking at a vaccinated person, it's just, there's not any way the vaccine could be tied to it. Unless there is
breath.
some kind of magical thing. Like, right. That's the thing. Like, and a menstrual cycle is based on hormones and body chemistry and not the way somebody looks at you, as far as I understand. Yeah. I'm trying to think of any scenario in which just interacting with another individual, for example, at a school, at work, would affect my menstrual cycle. I'm often good at like, okay, wait, even drawing like the farthest kind of like most far-fetched conclusion or idea, or like, okay, well, I could see this happening. I can't think of a thing.
I mean, this is okay. This is gonna be a really ignorant question, but I'm gonna ask it just because I'm not an expert on being not a person who menstruates. I'm just not an expert. All right, so I'm just gonna say that right there. You've taught me a lot.
I've had a lot of practice.
Can sustain sexual arousal? I'm sort of saying this as a joke, but is it something? I mean, I'm not saying this sort of sounds like a joke, but I'm sort of serious. Like, is that something that can impact your hormones in such a way that it could possibly? I guess can being horny affect your menstrual cycle? And I'm sort of maybe that sounds ignorant, but I'm sort of serious.
I am wondering about that myself, and I'll tell you honestly, I'm really not sure.
I've never been that horny. I don't know.
I was going to bring something up that, you know what? Maybe if this vaccinated person at work were like really freaking hard to deal with, extreme stress can affect somebody's menstrual cycle. So if the person at work that these 3 women got exposure to, if this person is just like a nightmare to deal with, that could have affected their cycles.
Yeah. All right.
Or you're right. Like maybe if the person is extremely appealing. But again, that's nothing to do with the vaccination, unless maybe it's because like if they were vaccinated and that made them so incredibly appealing because it's been difficult to get the vaccine.
Like you don't have COVID.
You don't get protection that way either.
Like you don't have COVID. I find that very sexy. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. That's a very attractive quality this day and age.
Yes. I have definitely heard data about like on dating sites now, everybody's like vaccine keyword. It's so high. Everybody's like talking about the vaccine everywhere.
It's the hottest thing.
I know, it really is. So maybe that's it. Like maybe the person was either so intensely attractive or the vaccinated person was so intensely annoying. But again, that's nothing to do with the vaccine. That's to do with that person who's either like amazing or really bothersome.
I'm gonna say my takeaway from this story is, look, I'm not, as always, the Sound of Tomorrow is not trying to tell you how to live your life, but I'm gonna maybe not go to this school if it's up to me. If it's myself, I'm gonna maybe not send my kids there because I think I'm certainly not going to pay extra for them to fire teachers willy-nilly, for them to fire teachers who are trying to protect their own health and the health of my children.
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely.
Like I heard hand washing causes you know, I guess we'll just go back to unspecified menstrual disruption. So if any of my teachers are seen washing their hands, they're fired. That's how it sounds.
I mean,
That's how you sound.
yeah,
So
that is definitely so dumb.
all right.
You want to hear something that's not dumb?
I do.
Oh my gosh, I'm so
God, I'd love
pleased.
to hear something that's not dumb. Just one thing.
So, well, it wasn't all that long ago, maybe several months ago. I mentioned that the New York Police Department had a new robot dog that
I think
was deployed upon the streets to protect, aka terrorize, citizens of New York City.
I think about that story a lot, only because it does terrify me a little bit. Like I've been you've that story stuck with me for the exact reasons you say. Like it's a little
Yeah.
terrifying.
Yep. Every time I think about it, I think about me out like mowing my lawn, and all of a sudden there's freaking Digidog like creeping down the sidewalk at me.
Hmm.
Like I'm I'm scared, like
Yeah.
literally scared. But the good thing is, I saw this on NPR today. It's an article by Emma Bowman entitled Creepy Robot Dog Loses Job with New York Police
Oh.
Department. And it says, indeed, after public outcry, a robotic dog once hailed by the New York Police Department as a high-tech crime-fighting sidekick is getting sent back to its owner. The police canceled a $94,000 contract with the robot's maker, Boston Dynamics, following a backlash tied to callouts to cut the police budget and concerns of police militarization and abuses of force. So we talked all about a couple months ago, like the police were all like, oh my gosh, this dog is amazing. It can totally climb stairs. It can pursue you into your apartment. It can ram you into a wall. It weighs 70 pounds. It can fall on you and crush your limbs. In theory, if it hits you hard enough, it could murder you. But I did read, I'm reassured in this article, the Boston Dynamics says that the company says that buyers must agree not to use the Digidog as a weapon. So we can rest assured that at least the police were like, we'd never use it as a weapon.
So
We can trust that.
what like so what did you buy it for? And
Yeah.
maybe this is my lack of imagination with American policing these days, that I can't think of what the police would use something for that's not a weapon.
The police would
But
never lie.
right,
They would never lie.
not the
So
NYPD.
when they said they weren't going to use Digidog as a they weren't going to use Digidog as a weapon, they were obviously like, they never would, never. It was just to surveil people.
Oh. They're probably in 2021. I have to imagine there are better ways. There are more subtle ways to surveil someone than with an 80-pound robotic dog following you down the
I know.
street. I don't know. I feel like it's probably, you could.
Yeah.
What happened to
It
phone
says
taps?
here, um, NYPD Technical Assistance Response Unit Inspector Frank Diagiacoma, don't know if I pronounced that name right, said, this dog is going to save lives, protect people, and protect officers, and that's our goal. And it says in the article, the purposes of the Digidog, an agile 70-pound hound, able to climb stairs and survey hazardous areas, was to help officers better identify dangers at crime scenes and keep officers safe. It certainly was, I'm sure it wasn't meant to terrorize citizens on the street.
Yeah.
I don't,
Yeah. And I mean,
right?
I guess if I'm going to give slight benefit of the doubt, I think of like the bomb squad people who have the little drones and remotes that can go and check out a bomb or whatever. But
Yes.
like, you don't need a 70-pound attack dog, which of course would never attack. We know, but
Because you promised you made a little pinky swear when you bought it.
you don't need. That seems like way overkill for surveillance of any kind.
Yeah. Yeah,
It
most
doesn't seem
definitely.
suited to that purpose very well. Like there are drones, there are smaller things. If you need to climb stairs or if you need to go, you can fly. There are flying drones. I mean, there are all sorts of
Yes.
things that can also be used, for violence. But less with more subtlety, I guess, than this
Yeah,
giant
I mean,
this
this,
giant you know attack thing.
yeah. There's a good quote from Mayor Bill de Blasio who says he's glad the Digidog was put down and said it's creepy, alienating, and sends the wrong message to New Yorkers.
You think?
Yeah. And let's see, their AOC says that when was the last time you saw next generation world class technology for education, healthcare, housing, et cetera, consistently prioritized for underserved communities like this? And that was
Well,
part of the reason, like, people were also saying, like, you have $100,000 for Digidog, but we don't have school lunch.
well, and again, we've said this a million times, or at least several times. This is what when we talk about policing eats up so many community funds. Um, and this is exactly what people are talking about when they're and I don't know if the defund the police is a good slogan or a bad slogan. I know people misinterpret it. I think a lot of people willfully misinterpret it. But when people talk about
I
defunding the
think
police, this
so.
is exactly what we're talking about. That there's a because again, backing out of this contract, I'm sure they didn't get a full. I'm sure they didn't get a full refund on that. So you spent however much money, or you were going to spend however much money for kind of a
Yeah.
silly toy. I mean, what really sounds like
And,
a very silly toy.
yeah. And that was
If
just
you
the
even want to,
lease, too.
right?
So
I mean, if you
presumably it was the $100,000 annually. It was not just buying this robot outright.
Yeah, I mean, like even if you want to assume that, like, okay, this is not going to be used for violence, it's going to be used for whatever. I mean, it's sort of a silly toy. And again, they're like you said, like AOC said, there are a million different community programs that are scrounging, getting by on scraps and
Mm-hmm.
donations. So
Right.
part of the question becomes, why do we have limitless money for weird robot futuristic horror movie attack dogs?
Yeah.
But we can't feed people or provide healthcare. It's just or even just and not even or not even or not even tackling those bigger problems, but just tackling local mental health issues, all sorts of things that $100,000 could come in handy for. um
Right.
and again, $100,000 is a tiny drop in the bucket of what goes into what gets spent on modern policing. And again, for what
Oh, yes.
we spend so much money on this, and then all the white people are still terrified all the time. So
Yeah.
so there you don't seem to be getting your money's worth. So yeah, i'm
Yeah.
i'm
Yeah. It is. I
i'm
feel like it's
thumbs
a
down.
triumph that Digidog has been put to rest. Though it does say in the article, police departments in Massachusetts and Hawaii are also testing Digidog.
Oh, of course. I
So,
mean, this is just in one place.
yeah, this is just the one in the Bronx that they've put down, and I honestly I wouldn't be surprised if RPD were to find a way to get a Digidog,
Yeah.
but they want one.
uh,
I don't know. I find it to be completely chilling, and like you said, I know people who buy perfectly good, like really great drones for a
mhm.
couple $100s. Like they're not $100,000,
and
and they
and
fly all
see
over the place. You need surveillance. They surveil great. Not that that's what
yeah,
people I know are using them for, but they could.
yeah, and seem more suited to the purpose. And again, there are the little, the bomb sniffing drones, like the land-based drones that will crawl on little feet. You can, there's stuff like this that exists that's not so overtly um super villain,
Yeah,
like Lex Luthor's got a big robot dog that chases you down the street. Like, that's so yeah, I'm with you. I'm glad to hear that. I hope I hope Digidog gets a nice foster family and can live out his years in you know romping
yeah, and that, yep, the
romping on
farm
a farm
upstate.
upstate. Yeah.
I don't know. I don't. I mean, I've got to say, as much as I love dogs and I love robots, Digidog really like scared me. To be honest with you.
Well, again, it's over the top. It's so over the
Yeah,
top. It's so and tone deaf. And again, we've talked about I and I'll do the preface that I said that when I brought this up before, that, of course there are lots of black people that love that love dogs. So I'm not saying black people don't like dogs or anything like that, but there is a history of law enforcement using dogs, specifically against black people. Which is why, I definitely know black people who are like, oh, I'm a little weird about dogs, because white people have frequently
Yes.
throughout history and current times as well used dogs specifically against black people. So
Right.
it's a bad visual on that level as well. I mean, more than a bad
Yeah.
visual, but it's sending a bad message in addition to,
Yes.
even if it were I guess even if it were a cat, at least then it would still be scary, but then you wouldn't have quite the same association, because
Yeah.
people don't usually stick cats on people. But
Right.
even
Right.
that would have
It's
been a
true.
little better,
Yeah. If it were Digicat, that would have a different look.
Yeah.
And I think it would be less chilling because everybody knows the shorthand of police dog.
Right. Right.
Like,
right. And police dogs are not, there are nice police dogs and police dogs that get used in bomb
course.
sniffing dogs and things like that. But
Yes.
you can't think of police dog without having that image of, dogs chasing people down the street. I mean, it's dogs can be tough.
They really can. And when I think of a police dog, I don't necessarily think of the dogs that go out like looking for missing people.
Right.
Or bomb sniffing dogs. I think of those ones as more helper dogs, that I do think of police dogs as attack dogs that are meant to scare, intimidate, and possibly harm.
Yeah.
So Digidog, I don't know. I hope they just let those servos rest in a storeroom.
I hope you enjoy the farm upstate.
Yeah.
So I've got a little something that I came across a piece on NPR, and this jumped out at me immediately because this speaks to a lot of things that I have felt lately about something that's crept into our culture. Not something that's just crept into our culture, but something that's really sort of become mainstream in our culture that I've noticed. And I haven't been able to articulate it, I think, in quite the way that this piece does. So this was an NPR piece entitled "How Extremists Weaponize Irony to Spread Hate" by Tom Dreisbach. And this is something that I've run into. So I'll preface this by there's one of my issues sometimes with, we talk about, I'm prefacing this article with why this jumped out at me. So one of the things that strikes me about when we talk about cancel culture in relation to comedy is, so you'll see a comedian who'll make a really offensive joke, and that's old and tired and hurtful and mean and not funny. I give a lot of leeway to I'll give a lot of leeway to something that's clever and funny, even if it's even if it's a little hurtful, and maybe that's not good either. But and then you'll be like, oh, that joke was kind of mean and not very funny and not nice, and they'll be like, why can't you take a joke? I'm just joking.
Yeah.
And the reason that jumps out at me is because I think probably a lot of people can relate to this kind of thing for a lot of reasons. But I know there are definitely times in my younger life where someone, not a comedian, but someone would say some really nasty things about gay people to me or whatever. And then I'd be like, but what are you, why that's, why are you saying, shut up. That's terrible. Why are you talking to me like that? And they'd be like, oh, you can't take a joke.
Yeah, absolutely.
So this is why this hit with me, because I have noticed this creeping into the culture. So the NPR piece starts talking about 22-year-old extremist Nick Fuentes. And the reason they talk about Nick Fuentes is because they give examples of him doing this, and then him actually explaining yeah, this is totally what we do and why we do it. So I won't repeat the things he's saying, but he
that's good.
Yeah, so he, on a recent episode of his live stream show, he went on an extended violent misogynistic rant, right? And very specific specific things you could do to women who are getting out of line, right? And I won't even go far. Like I said, I'm not even going to go as far as the article does in repeating some of it. But
Mm-hmm.
and then he ends with, "No, I'm kidding. Of course, just kidding. Just a joke."
Yeah.
NPR says Fuentes was following a playbook popular among domestic extremists, using irony and claims of just joking to spread their message while deflecting criticism. Um, researchers who track domestic extremism say the tactic, while not new, has helped several groups mask their danger, avoid consequences, and draw younger people into their movements. And the article further goes on to discuss how Fuentes actually has talked about this in videos. He says, this is quoting Fuentes, the extremist: "Irony is so important for giving a lot of cover and plausible deniability for our views." And he specifically cited Holocaust denial, or what he termed Holocaust revision, as a topic that's too fraught to discuss earnestly, even on the far right. But you can use the what he describes as the little bit of maneuverability that irony gives you. And in fact, after Fuentes questioned the death toll from the Holocaust in one rant, he later claimed to the Washington Post that it was just a lampoon. Blah 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 blah. So this goes on and on with other examples, but there's a lot of it gets into a lot of examples of sort of like trolling too, where these extremists will say something that they seem to obviously mean, and if you look at like the full scope of all the stuff they're talking about, but if you try to pin down anything in particular, it's like, oh, we're just kidding, or you're too sensitive, or why don't you understand, we're just being
Mm-hmm.
ironic. I think of, and I was thinking of even examples, even some dumber examples. You think of like the Roseanne thing, where she made the racist comparison. And
Oh,
even though she
yes.
had this like whole sort of recent history, I say recent because it seems like it, I don't know where this, I was always a big Roseanne fan back in the day, so I don't know where this stuff came from. Maybe it was always there, but she had this like whole uh she had this whole thread in her social media of all these like extreme right wing, racist, anti-trans, etc., things. Oh, but it was just a joke. What? I can't believe they fired
Uh-huh.
me from my show for just a joke. Um, I feel like I'm seeing this a lot, and it's sort of it's like gaslighting. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
And
it really is.
it's frustrating because it's really, I found this really hard to, it becomes really hard to argue with anything, because you're like, what you said, what you
Mm-hmm.
meant,
Mm-hmm.
but you won't defend it or even acknowledge that you said it.
Right.
So we can't, there's no discussion about it except you going, oh, I was just joking. Why are you so sensitive? Cancel culture.
Uh-huh.
What do you think about any of that, Heather?
No, it really is terrible because it cuts down anyway, like you said, to talk about anything. And I've definitely had this happen at times during my life with people I've known who will do or say terrible things, and they'll even turn it around to the extreme that then they're saying that I did or said those terrible things. And it really does seem like it gets to that point. And even like, no matter how open your eyes are to the gaslighting, it can send you into a bit of a spin
Yeah,
because it doesn't make any sense, and it's angering because someone is obviously lying directly to you,
right.
telling you that you don't know what's true. And
Well,
then it's impossible to even get anything done.
yeah. Well, no, you hit the nail on the head with that. I think that's exactly it, because it, before you can even have a, let's say, Holocaust denial, before you can even have a discussion of that, so you're like, oh, this person's a Holocaust denier. Okay, let's assume I'm going to engage with this person, which I'm not. But let's assume I'm going to.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Here are my facts, figures, testimonies. T- an one of the most well documented events in history. Here, let's go through it. But you can't
Mm-hmm.
even get there because
Right.
they've put up this wall of like, oh, I'm just kidding, so it doesn't matter, or I'm just exaggerating or being ironic, or I'm making a joke. So you have
Yeah,
to,
yeah,
before you can even have the conversation about the thing, you have to get through the wall of you were just kidding. And in some cases it's so, in some ways the media can be to blame for this, because the media will sort of report like, oh well, they said they were just kidding, and it's like, you know what, I would if someone has a pattern, if someone's got, in the examples they give, like these people have talk shows, they have
right,
like live stream talk shows where they're consistently saying the same things. But then if someone
right.
goes, oh, what about this thing you said last night? They're like, oh, just kidding. It's like, well, you've been talking
Yeah,
about
that
it
was just
for
broad
weeks.
satire.
So the fact that, um, you know, it's frustrating, but, and then the fact that the media or anyone talking about these people ever gives it any credence
Mm-hmm.
is extra frustrating. And the article actually goes into, I didn't realize this part. I thought I knew a lot about um the KKK, the history of the Ku Klux Klan. I'm certainly not an expert, but I thought I knew a lot. I didn't realize this. So the article speaks about how, and I'll just quote here: historians have documented how the early iterations of the Ku Klux Klan were portrayed by group members and their allies as outlandish rather than as a dangerous terrorist group. The KKK put on racist minstrel shows and created its own song. Descriptions of attacks by men in hoods who had titles like Dragon, Ghoul, and Wizard were often seen by white Americans as tall tales and ghost stories. Newspapers that supported the KKK played up those aspects of the group and mocked their opponents for supposedly taking the KKK too seriously. So, you know, uh, not a new strategy. I
No,
didn't
it's
realize
not
this.
new at all.
You think about some of the stuff that the Klan, the KKK has used, and we have dragons and it seems very silly. It never I'm shocked that it never occurred to me, or I never understood that some of that was deliberately silly, like silly to give themselves cover.
Mm-hmm, 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 mm-hmm. Yeah, you're right. You're right. I hadn't thought of that either. Yeah, and then it gets really chilling because they like you want there to be truth, right?
Yeah,
Somewhere in the world. And when someone is saying or doing horrible things, being part of the clan, you know, being an extremist in a way that they want to terrorize people, hurt women, etc. You, when you can't even get them to acknowledge or to admit, I guess, because they know in their hearts what's there, it just gets so frustrating. And it's making me think about, you were talking about trying to, your hypothetical trying to engage with a Holocaust denier. And I know last year I spent much more time than I ever should have trying to engage with somebody who is definitely a racist, but who would not admit that he's a racist and would not admit that racism exists in our society.
right.
And so I would do the stuff that you were saying. Like I'd get the articles together. I would get stories from friends together about their personal experiences and stories from Black friends about their personal experiences, what they'd been through in this very city. I would collect all this stuff, quotes, analyses, statistics. You go through all this stuff to find some fact-based things, but then you run into the like, oh, that's not even a thing. Like, but I have vast amounts of documentation showing you it's a thing. No, it's not.
Yeah. There's, I think there's some, in some ways, like, the example you use, like racism, like in some ways there's value to people, um, to sort of faking it till you make it with racism a little bit. I mean, in the sense of like, you know, we've talked about how we live in a racist society. We all have racist inclinations that are just born into us. So,
Mm-hmm.
um, there's some value to not to shoving that down as much as possible, even if they're in there. But on the whole, like I wish at least, you, so many of these conversations, it's like, what's inside of you, why
Yes.
you're saying what you're saying, um, and it's clear it's clear where you're coming from and where you're trying to get to. I wish you could at least be honest, because it's frustrating and it's if you're someone who doesn't believe the Holocaust happened, that's absurd and obscene. But
Yes.
I wish you'd at least just say that, so that
Right.
there could be some kind of honest discussion about that topic, rather than you just kind of squeezing it in around the margins and then pretending you were never there. The same thing
Right.
with, you see people like, you see people sort of like, oh, there's no such thing as racism. Black people are all making it up. And it's like, well, okay, black people are all liars, but there's no such thing as racism. And you don't believe that there's any racism. But, and you are colorblind and love all races equally, except
Uh,
black people sometimes. I mean, it's
yeah, it's
this.
like,
Just be honest with yourself about where you're coming from. I think that's the only way you can. I think that's the only way you can grow. And then, in the case of particularly these, and you see this with politicians so many times too. It's like you know what you're getting at.
mm-hmm.
And the people who are
Yeah.
listening to you know what we're getting at, but we can't have a debate about it because, you know, we're seeing this with statehood for Washington D.C. Washington D.C. is, of all the states and territories in the United States, it's, except for the U.S. Virgin Islands, it's the area with the highest percentage of black people by far, by far. And a lot of, and you see politicians contorting themselves to come up with reasons why Washington D.C. can't be a state. And it's, there are different points of view there, I will say, but I think an awful lot of it comes down to, I really hate
Yes.
the idea that all these black people would have full voting rights. But they're contorting
Yes.
themselves like, oh, but in
Right.
1782, people didn't feel like DC should ever be a state. And, I mean, it's just like, just
Like,
be honest about your reasons at least, so we can at least discuss that. But
well, and that's the thing. And I think they think they're awfully clever. And I
yeah,
think they think no one's going to see it. They're like, oh, I'm going to pretend my reason is because of something that someone wrote in a letter to someone else in 1782.
mm-hmm.
And then they'll buy that. They'll listen to that reasoning. And then in my heart of hearts, I know how I really feel, but nobody will ever see it. It's like, no, we see it. Just say it.
Yeah.
Like, you're not so smart. I guess the thing with the extremists is that rhetoric can be very tempting for people who maybe don't necessarily pick everything apart.
Right.
The way, like, you and I, for example, I think we're known for possibly even being annoying, possibly even going too far and
Possibly.
trying to pick things apart, unravel them, really see what is going on as best we can,
Yeah.
and re-examine them too in the future. That might be weird that we do that. I don't mind that we do it. But also, like, I can't stand to think that there are people who are like, yeah, that's right, in 1872, because you think that they've got to be in their hearts of hearts also being like, I hear the dog whistle and I know what they're saying.
I guess, if you have such, we'll take, whatever aspect of racism, whatever, of a billion aspects of racism you want to use as an example. If you believe strongly enough in that you're willing to take steps or make laws or push for things that impact people's lives negatively, like if you if you believe it's so important that black people not get voting rights, then Nigel disagrees, which is good.
Yes, but he is fine. He's absolutely
Then
fine.
you
Don't
should
worry
be able
about
to
him.
articulate that and just say it. I mean, if you're
Yeah.
gonna take steps to keep black people from voting,
Mm-hmm.
then and you feel strongly enough that it's important to keep black people from voting, but you don't want to spell out your reasons, because you know they're bad and people won't like them. I mean, you really got to analyze that. I don't know how you get to that point. In some cases, like you said, with the extremists, it's like, well, they do it because it benefits them, and it gives them
Mm-hmm.
cover and blah blah blah. And some other people, and politicians, I think the same thing. Some people just don't examine their own, you know, their parents told them one thing and they never pull those views out of the closet again, so they live with all these paradoxes without ever trying to square them. I don't know, but people are bad is the point.
Yeah.
Not
Yeah,
you,
I mean,
space cadets.
no, not the space cadets. And Ross, you know who else are good people? Not at all bad people, the opposite of bad people. Our fine fellow programmers from the fantastic program Music Matters right here on WAYO LP Rochester, which is coming up next after this very program. So stay tuned for those good people playing that good music. You know, you're not the only one with a supernatural secret.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, in just 3 days, I can turn into a werewolf.
Heather, it's 2021. Nobody cares if you shave your legs or not. Nobody. It's
I've
fine.
been shaved my legs since the pandemic started.
Do it. Yeah, do it or don't do it. Nobody cares. It's fine.
I'm not gonna. Who cares?
You're all right.
Ow.